All right, Damir, what's going on, man? Welcome to the Dad Edge.
Hey man, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Productivity. That's what we're talking about today. I'm excited to talk about this, especially in the dad space.
Yeah.
It's no secret that I think men are stretched thin. Everybody wants something from us, and we're constantly in depth with that four-letter word called busy, right?
Hmm.
And I think that's a four-letter word for a reason, busy. But um, so before we get started, I'm so curious. How did you even get involved with productivity?
Yeah, it's funny because I really was not born productive. My wife is one of those people that you would think would be a productivity coach. Understood it all from the beginning, loves calendars, loves organizing herself, loves to-do lists. You would think that that person would become the productivity coach. I'm the guy who was the opposite. Totally disorganized, ambitious and smart, but completely disorganized and you know, the kind of guy who could take 80 hours a week to do 40 hours worth of work, right?
Mm.
That was my whole MO is I had to work twice as hard to get the same amount of work done. And, it worked okay for me for a while. I got through college, got through a good college and got into Wall Street, and I think a lot of people can relate to that indefatigable energy you have in your 20s where you can just be dumb, with your productivity. I'll just work more. I'll just work six times as much. And then, in my mid 30s, what happened was I just collapsed at work. My friend was there. I was giving a presentation. He said, "You just melted. Like your eyes rolled back in your head and you just fell right down." And they took me to the hospital, a couple weeks of tests and trying to figure out what it was. And finally, I got diagnosed with salary man sudden death syndrome, which is literally when you work yourself to death. People have probably heard about it in Asia, like, oh, man in Asia works himself to death. And it doesn't really happen a lot in North America, but I have the dubious distinction of almost doing that to myself. So the diagnosis was easy. It was like, hey, you got to work no more than 40 hours a week. And so for me, I had to have a very fast religious conversion around my productivity if I was going to keep the money coming in. And I had people dependent on me. And of course, my whole ego was wrapped up in my work. And, it's interesting. I had a rapid and, externally forced transformation around my productivity, but very much like the smoker who quits and then becomes the annoying guy who tells everybody that they should quit. I'm the guy who used to be totally unproductive, knew every single reason, had every excuse in the book why I wasn't, why I was the exception and that all the rules didn't apply to me. And now I'm the guy who's like, yo, yeah, you need to do it. Come on, I've done it. It's easy. Let's do it.
So I'm really, really curious. I think one of the traits of men in particular is like, not only do I work a lot of hours, but we are stressed out, overwhelmed, overworked. But for some crazy reason, we take a lot of nobility and pride. And look at how hard I'm working. Like
I call it the busy badge. Look at me. Here we
oh,
go, right there.
okay.
Like you're walking
Yeah.
around. It's like, you can always know when you talk to somebody and like at a barbecue, how you doing? Oh man,
So
so
busy.
much.
Yeah.
It's just so busy, But you tell they're actually proud of it. They're like, yeah, look at me, man.
Yeah. Well, are you happy? No, no, not really at all. I'm
So
killing
miserable.
myself, but it's awesome. Like I'm working really hard. Yeah. This was probably about a year and a half ago, give or take. We've got a large Facebook community with thousands of dads in it. And I saw this meme on Instagram and it made a lot of sense to me. And it basically broke down the hours in a week. So it said there's 168 hours in the week. You're going to work 40 to 50 of those hours, right? Then you're going to sleep, call it 6 to 8 hours. That's another whatever, right? 40 to 50. You have this, and this to do. But basically what it was saying is you have about 30 hours left over per week after everything is all said and done. And if we ever audit our time, we probably are watching how we're spending those 30 extra hours, like Netflix and probably not the most productive things. And then we have this label of like, we're just so busy. And I took that meme and I put it in that Facebook group, and I was like, what's your thoughts on this? And just asking all the guys. And I got to tell you, that was a real aha moment for me, because I saw miserably overworked, busy men fighting for that busy badge that you're talking about. Like I had a few guys tell me, they're like, who sleeps 6 to 8 hours a day? I sleep 5. Right. Yeah. And who works 40 to 50 hours? I work 80. Like, what's wrong? Like, this is totally inaccurate. This is totally wrong. And I'm like, I mean, these guys were fighting for their misery. That's what I saw in that post. I was like, wow, this is fascinating.
When you think about it, when I talk to people, they become so convinced of I call it this is just how it is narrative.
Yeah.
This is just how it is. And when you think about how efficient that narrative is at cutting off any discussion, any positive progress. When I tell people who are stuck in 7 hours of meetings, I'm like, yeah, I can get you down to 1 hour of meeting a day. Nah, Damir, you can't. You don't understand. This is just how it is. Or, people who are working 80 hours a week, I'm like, let me get you down to 40. And they're like, no, you can't. Sorry. This is just how it is. And it really is this nice, tidy way of just sort of wrapping it all up and saying, no, I'm not even going to consider improvement in this dimension of my life. Like, this is just how it is. And of course, if you've bought into this is just how it is narrative, then the only thing you have left is to find some kind of identity inside of that, right? And the busy badge is that. It's like people who've given up, who've really accepted this is just how it is, and they're just trying to find some modicum of self-pride. And in that sense, I don't blame them. I wouldn't, I'm not mad at them. I don't blame them. I can really relate to it, because again, I was that dude. I'd love to tell you that I woke up one day and just realized that I was living my life wrong. Nope. If my doctor hadn't stopped me and given me that limitation, if my body hadn't fallen apart, I'd probably be in New York living that same life right now. I mean, I really credit external factors. Thank God for those external factors that stopped me, because I'd still be going. I was on a path, man. I was on that path, and I was committed to that lifestyle.
Yeah. And, there is that badge of honor, right? As a man, like, look how hard I'm working. Like, you call it the busyness badge. I really want to know, I mean, you've been in this space for a while. What's the psychology behind that? Why do we take pride in that when to be quite honest, we're probably pretty worn out, overwhelmed, and miserable? What's the psychology behind taking pride in that?
I mean, I'm just guessing, right? Because I'm not going to psychotherapize the entire North American population. But, I believe it comes from the Protestant work ethic, right? Even if you're not Protestant, I think we're all sort of steeped in that Protestant work ethic of, the reward for good work is.
What is it?
If you can finish that one. Oh, more work.
I've heard it.
Sometimes I'll say that. I'll just say that. And it's funny. People who haven't even heard the phrase, I'll just say the reward for good work is, and people just automatically, it'll just come right out of their mouth. More work.
More work.
And that's the Protestant work ethic. It's like, shut up. It's okay to be miserable. Work is the path to salvation, right? Your identity is your work. Your work is the cross that you bear. So if you're in that, Judeo-Christian suffering mentality. And I was raised by a pastor. I know there's many people of faith who don't live in that paradigm, but I'm just saying, in that classic 200-300 years ago, Protestant paradigm of like suffering makes you a better person, then, obviously suffering in your work makes you a better person.
I used to buy into that. I used to before I was doing this full time, I used to be in medical device sales. And I remember, I was good at my job. I was promoted all the time. I was promoted into management. So I covered 10 states at one point with 10 reps, and I was constantly on planes, and I was miserable because I hated getting on. Like, one of the loneliest, most miserable places for me was in an airport, because I just hated it. I knew that I was away from my wife, my family, and my boys, and I was miserable and I hated it. And there was that part of me, I was like, well, I'm making really good money, so there's really no other way. And by the way,
it's just how it is.
It's just how it is. And look how hard I'm working. Like, look how much I'm traveling, right? Look how much I'm doing. And, I have 4 boys, 16, 14, 8, and 6. And my two older ones, not so much my younger ones, they remember me traveling a lot. And they'll even tell you now, they're like, I hate it when you travel. I was like, okay. I was like, and I knew that. I was like, well, tell me more about that. And they told me something that was very shocking to me and very humbling. They were like, well, we didn't like that you were gone. Like we felt like you were kind of a weekend dad sometimes. And, but the worst thing was the night before you had to leave, because you'd be packing up your suitcase. You were quiet. You were angry. You were miserable. You didn't want to go. And you kind of took it out on us. I don't know if you really realized that, but you were kind of cold, right? Because you were upset and stressed. And I was like, and dude, I don't know what it was about hearing that, because, and they were absolutely accurate. My wife would always tell me, the night before you leave, I hate it because you're stressed out. You don't want to go. You're miserable. And it's just like, it's like this heavy burden. Like, it's like there's tension in the air. And I was like, oh my God. So not only was I not there, but the night before I would leave, I'm leaving on this like really low note, like this, putting tension in the air that didn't need to be there. But, and there was
can I just suggest that, we're making it sound like so bad that like, who would ever do it? But I always think that when you're playing a game where you don't like the payoffs, you just have to look for the payoffs you are getting, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I would suggest is, it, as miserable as that sounds, it's a game that you can win, right?
How so?
When work is a game that we can win. It's like, I do this, and then I get a promotion, and then I get more pay, and then I do this, and then I get a promotion, I get more pay. We like, as human beings, especially as men, to play very simple, predictable games where we know we can win, right? And the thing about adult life is it is this very hard to win game, right? If you really look at defining success in all the different ways that it could be defined, it really is like a Rubik's Cube where you can't just solve it on one side. You've got to, we're talking about your spiritual walk and your relationship with yourself and your higher power. We're talking about your relationship with your wife and your kids and your close people. We're talking about, yes, career, financial success. We're talking, there's so many dimensions of really like winning this thing called life. Boy, that's a tough game to play. It confuses people. It's hard. It's unpredictable. The pieces move around, just like a Rubik's Cube where you think you got one side solved and then you solve it, but then you ruin the other side and you're like, damn it, you got to start over again and try to resolve the puzzle. Work, by contrast, is like solving one side of the Rubik's Cube and ignoring the rest. Like, okay, yeah, well, I'm going to ignore my body and I'll ignore my family, but I am playing the heck out of this really simple, predictable game, right? And I can win this game. And so I think, that to me makes a lot of sense, because I've been there, like, letting my body go, letting my relationships go, and just sort of saying, well, you know what? Like, I don't know how to solve the whole Rubik's Cube, but I know how to solve this one side. I'll be damned if I'm not solving it. Like, you wouldn't believe I'm putting all my effort. And so in that sense, it's a game that you can win, isn't it?
It is a game you can win. In fact, and I would say probably a low-hanging fruit game, right? For most men in general, right? I mean, we take a lot of pride in what we do usually. I also think, and I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, there's so much of our identity that's wrapped up in what we do, right? I'll never forget. Have you ever seen the movie Anger Management with Adam Sandler? Yeah. Where he's like, all right, Dave, he's like, tell us who you are. And he goes on to say what he does. He's like, I didn't ask you what you do. Who are you? And then he keeps pushing him. And of course, then Adam Sandler gets pissed off. But normally what we do is every question that we answer as it relates to what we do, who we are, is wrapped up in what we do professionally. Right.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, that's it. It's an easy game to play. And it's also a place in our lives where men get a lot of validation, where we're measured.
And the world, make no mistake, this is not just in your head. The world also values it a lot.
Yeah.
Right? Like a lot of women, once they've married a successful man, then want him to take on these other attributes, right? Of being a caring father and everything. But make no mistake, when you're dating a man, right, you're looking for somebody who's got it together. Right?
Yeah.
Who's on a career path, right? I mean, so it's also reinforced externally. It's not just us imagining it. This is something that society wants us to have and value. So what's funny is, jumping back a bit to my path. When I finally fizzled out of finance. And, I was able to actually stay for a couple more years by changing the way that I worked. But I realized very quickly, it put me on a completely different path of reconsidering what success looked like. And one of the things that I came up with my wife was this idea of a lifestyle first philosophy, meaning instead of saying, I'll be happy at $1 million a year, or I'll be happy when I have this, it was more of like, what will my life feel like? And when we sketched out, even though we didn't know the details of where we'd be living or what house, we left all those details vague, but sort of like, hey, I want a life where I can wake up and not have to run out the door to go to work. I want to be able to like start work at 10 o'clock. I want to be able to this was a big one for me. I wanted to be able to nap every single day at 1 o'clock, right? That to me, like taking a nap every day at 1 o'clock to me was more important now than making $1 million. Not that I'd say no to $1 million, but I'd say no to $1 million if it meant living a lifestyle where I couldn't take a nap. I'm a napper. I like to just lay down in the middle of the day, get that refreshing like 20 minutes in, and come back to my work. It just makes me feel like a better person. I'm more relaxed, I'm more calm, I just enjoy my life more. So that's lifestyle first. We also said, we created a couple other provisos. So we said we wanted to be able to work from anywhere. That was a really important thing for us. Like I want to be able to take my laptop and pack it in the suitcase and go anywhere. I want to be able to not just visit Paris, but live in Paris for, months at a time if I want to. And so that was lifestyle first. And what we did was we sort of etched that into the tablets. We said, okay, we want to make money, but we'll only make money insofar as we don't violate any of these lifestyle tenets. And what's funny is I do believe that was really the secret to all the success downstream, because what I had done was I had visualized what the Rubik's Cube looked like solved, fully solved. And then as I went to find out what career I wanted to take on next, what businesses I wanted to take on next, what decisions, every decision was filtered through the lens of, does it get me closer to this Rubik's Cube completely solved version of my life? I actually, and it was funny because it was just a silly exercise when we did it. It didn't feel particularly important. And now I look back and point to that as probably the most significant pivot moment in my life, when I put my lifestyle first and then built everything else around that.
Isn't it amazing that, and I think a lot of people don't know this, one of the most beautiful things about being a business owner is that you can actually build a business around your life and not the other way around. And I think a lot of people miss the mark on that. We one of the things we have two different mastermind programs for dads. One of them is business owner dads. So we've been doing that program now for probably 3 or 4 years now, helping men with their businesses, helping them, not work as much or as hard, basically helping them build the business around their life, not the other way around. Yeah. Because if you do it incorrectly, right, you can literally work yourself into a low-paying job that doesn't give you a whole lot of fulfillment, and you don't make that much money, and you're busy nonstop. You're like never not on. And the same is true for a career at times, right? We can just literally work ourselves into these jobs, and we're working just a ridiculous amount. And here's the interesting thing. We do this exercise with men when they come join us in our mastermind called the Eulogy exercise.
Oh yeah.
And it's basically like, it's the eulogy that either their son, their daughter, their wife, or whatever is going to read at their funeral. And I think to date, I've heard hundreds, if not maybe 1,000 at this point, and not ever one time, not once have I ever heard, I'm so glad I worked so many hours.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank God I made partner at my law firm.
Right. It's never that stuff.
Never. Can I tell you a story that's funny? We were on a sailing trip with another couple. I'm not going to mention who they are, but they're big in the personal development space, really big. And we just thought, we're not worthy. I mean, they are just like, we were just at that point, we were so early in our journey. I think maybe we were making, $300,000 or $400,000 a year from our business. Now we were living abroad in Bali. I mean, we felt like we were balling out. I mean, that felt like more money because our costs had gone down so low, and we were making 300 or 400 top line, not net, but top line. we were feeling great about ourselves, but then when we go on this sailing trip with this couple who's so high powered, and of course, the dreaded moment came when they said, "Hey, what's your thing? What do you guys do?" And I was just like, I wasn't groveling, but I was sort of like, well, hey, we're small. We just got this small little business, but we've put our lifestyle first. We work less than 4 hours a week. We live in Bali. We're making 300-400 top line, and God, we're just enjoying our life. Not like you guys. And of course, all the provide. Oh, we're not like you guys. You guys are so big. Yeah, we admire what you're doing. And as soon as I finished that, the husband looked at the wife and just went, oh. And she did the same thing. And I was like, what? And he just said, God, I wish we had stopped there. I wish we were there. We were making, between 300 and 500, and we didn't have a big organization. We didn't have a lot of responsibility. We were working, a medium amount of hours, but we had this thing in our head that we had to break $1 million, $1 million, $1 million, $1 million. We got to get to that $1 million mark. And we got there, we blew through it. We got to $1 million, and then it became 5 million, then it became 10 million. And we never stopped to think, what are we creating that we're trapped by? And now, they were like, now we've got a building, we've got an office building with, over 100 employees in it who are, their families are dependent on us continuing to do our thing. And he was honest. He said, and we've become hooked on the money. So now we are making, over 10 million, and now we're living that over 10 million life. But it really struck me that if you don't design your life well going forward, a lot of times it's a one-way street. And even in success, because you told a story about, and I agree with you, most people who design themselves into the center of the business won't even be successful. They'll be poor, or the business will go out of business. But even in success, it's almost even more miserable. Now you've got a board. Now you got hundreds of employees, a middle management layer. And I just thought that was so striking to me that we were on the right path, that putting our lifestyle first was the right way to do it. And what's funny is in the last 12 months, we broke the 7-figure mark, which was never a thing for us. We never said, oh, we got to break 7 figures. We got to break it. We broke it. We just designed our lifestyle. We focused on our lifestyle. We're much more upset when we start working over 5 hours a week. That's the, 5-alarm fire. Like when our hours go up and it breaks our lifestyle, that's when we stop the presses and we have to fix something. And it happens once in a while. But for us, breaking 7 figures was just a off gas of creating a life that really worked for us.
I think that's.
Give me a second. I just got to plug this in. I realized I wasn't plugged in.
No, you're good. It's a move. It's really interesting, and I'll share this quick story on top of what you just said, and then I would love to actually dive a little deeper and give our audience some real ways they can like literally listen to this podcast and start implementing a few things in their life that might make things a little bit simpler and more productive with less time. There is, so we like I said, we have 4 boys. We live in a decent home. It's not like a gargantuan home by any means, but it's a decent sized ranch home with a finished basement, and every person in the house has got their own room, which is great and all that. And I can honestly tell you that we're like living in our dream house, and it's still kind of a simple house. It overlooks some water, which is really, really cool, which is what we wanted. And then they're about a mile down the road. I have this friend of mine who owns an uber successful construction company, and he just built this mansion that is absolutely insane. It's got like its own zip code. And every day I drop my boys off at school, we drive past that house. And here's the fascinating thing about, when I think his business is probably 30 to 40 million. Right. Mm. And, so we drove past that house, here and there, but I've asked my boys, and I thought that this was just a fascinating response from them. I'm like, would you ever want me to have a business that is so successful that we could live in a house like that? All 4 of my boys and my wife has said, no, not at all. And I'm like, really? I was like, why? Because like, Like that is like the
It's
Mecca
dope.
right there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, come on. And they're like, no, nope, it's too much. Number one. Number two, like, I think we'd be like a lonely family. And I'm like,
Mm,
what do you mean a lonely family? She's like, well, think about it. Like that house is so big and it's so spread out. Like the cool thing about our house is like, if you want your privacy, there's enough room. You go get your privacy. But if you want to be around people, you don't have to walk far at all. In fact, you can hear everybody from where you're at. And
yeah.
all four of my boys and my wife has said, I really like that. I like being able to be in a home that is big enough for all of us, but is also we don't each have our own zip code because that would not be enjoyable either.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I thought that was, and the funny thing too is that, this person I'm talking about, like he's got 30-40 million dollar problems. Like some of the things that he tells
Ooh.
me, I'm just like, holy crap, dude. Like I couldn't imagine going through that in my business. And so I think I think you're absolutely right. You have to be very, very careful because a lot of people are just like, I want $1 million business. I want a $5 million business. I want a 10 million, but there's a cost that's associated with those things if you're not careful. Right. And sometimes you get
Yes.
there, right? Like the individuals you're talking about, you get there, you're like, holy crap, we've arrived. Well, now we're really used to this. We're maybe not nearly as happy as what we were. We'll make the best of it, but this is a lot. Like this is a
Yeah.
lot of stress.
So, you were talking about getting into some specifics, and I'll just frame it with this. I always tell my clients when we start that what I really want for them, and I think success working together, is getting the four freedoms. And here's the four freedoms that I've seen, and maybe there's more. The first is financial freedom. And, for me, financial freedom is such a fundamental resilience to build into your life. Because when you think about so many things that we could do at work, part of the reason that we don't ask for the things we need, ask for a promotion, ask for more time off, draw a boundary with a bad client or a bad employer is because we've got that sword of Damocles held over our head. Well, I can't ask for what I want because if I get fired, the statistic is that I think they were saying most American households cannot handle a financial calamity of $3,000 or more. Most American households, they don't have that kind of resilience to even handle a financial calamity of $3,000. And I've even seen people who have ostensibly millions of dollars in assets who are cash poor, meaning they're millionaires, but they don't have financial safety. They don't have financial resilience, right? They can't take a hit. I think another thing is time freedom. So if financial freedom is a dimension of freedom, I think time freedom, meaning like, do we have the freedom to put our time where we want, whether it's taking a nap or playing with our kids? Do we have career freedom? And I think financial freedom and time freedom equal career freedom. And so, for example, for me, my wife and I have any day that I want, I can step away from this business. We could retire. Now, the retirement would be what I call a lean retirement, right? We'd have to make some sacrifices that I don't think I'm really, right? What that means is I don't have to take partnerships with people I don't want to partner with. I had a client recently who revealed themselves to be a little bit unstable and mean, and I didn't even respond to their email. I refunded their money and I deleted them from my system. It was literally like, you're done, you're out, right? And that's what you get with career freedom is the ability to say, I don't want to be doing this if it means dealing with this person or dealing with this scenario. And then I think that all adds up to spiritual freedom, meaning when you're not worried about your finances, when when you have a little bit of time to just think and be, and when you've got the ability to make moves in your career and do the things you want to do, I think that opens the space for you not to let work take over your whole life. You can actually be thinking, what kind of father am I? What am I doing with myself? What's my own journey through this thing called life? So those are the four freedoms. I'll just say it really quickly. Time freedom, financial freedom, career freedom, and spiritual freedom. And to me, that's what I'm always looking to build into my life is I don't need more money. I always want more freedom. And if freedom can give me money, or if I can have all the freedom I want and get a little extra money, I'll take it. But so often the opportunities offered to a person are, hey, I'll give you this money, but then I'm going to take away these freedoms from you. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. And I think that a lot of people don't understand that there can be a cost that's associated with working more, right? Unless you're able to build, a business or a career around your life. I'm curious, like one of the things I know that you teach is, as it relates to productivity, is literally getting to the hour, right, of planning your week. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when anybody comes to me, and I'm talking about, I've worked with Silicon Valley C-suite executives. I've worked with all the way down to stay-at-home moms who are running big households. I mean, everything between. I
Should
don't
work with my wife.
I would love to. The first thing I do with every single person is we start with planning the week. And the reason I say that is, this is funny because we surveyed 5,000 professionals who manage between 5 and 50 people. So successful people. We asked them, what's the key to win your week? As you can imagine, 94% in their top 5 was you have to plan your week to win your week. Okay. Every single person who's listening right now is thinking, duh, totally understood. Right. We followed up with that same cohort of people and said, okay, if that's true, how often in the last 8 weeks did you plan your week? Or did you consistently plan it every week for the last 8 weeks? Can you guess what percentage that was?
I'll say 20.
It was less than 1%.
What?
It was less than 1%, right? So that started me down a journey that has taken me to a really interesting place. And in fact, we've written a book about winning your week. But one of the things that made me realize is there is a Texas-sized gap between the fact that every single person, if you said, what do you need to do to win the week this week, would say planning their week, and less than 1% of us are doing it consistently. What is up there? And I would say that the first thing is that we don't recognize that this is a classic place where our lizard brain is in competition with our logic brain, and the lizard brain is winning.
Okay.
Because when you think about planning your week, and this really is the lowest hanging fruit on the tree. When people ask me at parties, and it's a lot of times they do it in a very rude way. Oh, you're a productivity coach. Well, then tell me, man, what's the most important thing I need to be doing? It's like, they say it in a really mean way. And I always say, winning the week, right? If you plan your week, if you're planning your week, you're winning your week. So why don't we do it is the question.
Yeah, why don't we
plan our week?
Yeah.
And this is probably the biggest aha moment that I've had, is that we have massive resistance built up around planning our week. Because when you think about it, one of my jokes is planning your week is taking a slap on the face today instead of a punch in the face on Thursday. Because when you're sitting down, think about it, it's Sunday. When you go to actually open your calendar, open your to-do list, look at that. What is the first feeling that comes to your mind? If you just put yourself in that place of, it's Sunday afternoon, I'd rather be spending time with my family, but I'm going to open my calendar and look at my to-do list and scan the week. What is the first feeling that comes up for you?
For me, I would say it's like, I don't want to do this.
Dread, right?
Yeah, it's like dread. Yeah, it's like, man, I really don't want to there's actually, and I'm sure you've heard this, but there's questions that come up for me, right? Like when not granted, I do plan my week. I live and die by my calendar. I'll even put the times where I am in the gym. I'll put the times that I am writing. I'll put the times where I am thinking. Like, it's kind of crazy, like how I do it. But yeah, and I've done this for a while, but there's still that feeling of like overwhelm is a big one. Especially if I'll look at everything that I think needs to be accomplished that week, and I'll look at my week and I'll be like, okay, where am I going to fit that in? And then I'll start to, go ahead.
This is the point that I'm making. I mean, so quite simply said, no wonder you have avoidance to planning, because the very act of planning, if you think about it, is inviting a week's worth of problems into a 30-minute stretch of time, right? Of course, you're not going to enjoy that. Right? It's not enjoyable to say, what could I dread in the coming week that could pop out and surprise me?
Oh my gosh,
what are my obligations again? What are my assets of time versus liabilities of time? And realizing invariably that they aren't going to match and that some hard decisions have to be made. So I guess the first message I would put out there is, if planning your week is the most crucial skill to winning your week, and less than 1% of us do it, the answer is simply, we're not recognizing how much deep set avoidance we can build, right? And the problem with our animal brain is your animal brain isn't smart enough to say, oh, Larry's just, feeling a little bit anxiety around planning, but it's actually ultimately a good thing. No, when you feel that anxiety, when you feel that fear, when you feel that overwhelm, your animal brain just says very simply, this thing feels bad. Let's get Larry away from it, right? And so what you really have to do is transform that resistance into a craving for planning. So let's just talk really quickly about this, because if this is the only thing that I could teach people how to do, I could teach everybody, I could teach you everything else. I've got an awesome free training online. I could teach you everything else downstream. But when you can get rid of the resistance, people can find that they start doing the things they knew they should always be doing as long as they could get rid of that resistance. So here's how to do it. Let's start with the story. My wife and I, we went to Paris. We were staying in Paris, and it was a Saturday, and we had to leave that day. But it was 11:30 in the morning. We didn't have to leave till 11:30 at night. So we had this big stretch of time to wait. This is before we had kids, and we just said, let's go sit at a cafe and do some work. So it's Saturday morning. We go to this French cafe, and I'm telling you, we were not prepared for how cool this cafe was. I'm talking about, like, I felt like a cooler person sitting in this cafe, looking over the Eiffel Tower, all the cool French people with the little baguette and the latte. I mean, it was just, take every single detail you think about France, and it was just perfect.
That's awesome.
And my wife and I were just beaming ear to ear. We planned our week, just had a great time, then sat back and enjoyed a latte and looked at the Eiffel Tower and just felt like $1,000,000. And my wife, when we were leaving, she said, gosh, what's funny is planning our week every week just feels like pulling fingernails. But I could do it like this every week of my life. I mean, this was
cool.
Is the best planning I ever had. And it really stuck with me because I thought, what was different about this? Why could I do it like this for the rest of my life, but doing it at home feels like pulling fingernails? And the answer is because I had actually created an environment that I had some appeal towards. So when we came back home, we found the coolest little bistro that we could possibly find, and we set a recurring date. So we don't do evening dates anymore. Like on Saturday morning is our date. We get the nanny to look after the kid, or we'll take her along. We go to this super chic bistro. They know our name at this point. We have a table reserved in the back, and we will plan our week together in 30 minutes and then sit there for another 2 or 3 hours. And I'll tell you what, the connection that we have as a couple in that 2 or 3 hours is so much more profound than anything else, because it's the moment when we faced our fears together. We've looked at everything that has to happen as a family, and I get the best version of my wife and she gets the best version of me because we've got a plan for the week. I call it the high five couple. It's like, good, everything's planned. We know what's going to happen in our life, in business and in our personal life. We get that high five moment, and then I get to enjoy the best version of my wife when we sit there in the cafe, have a great brunch, drink our lattes, have our little, croissants. And I'll tell you what, I will reorganize my entire week not to step on that Saturday morning. That is my favorite moment in the week. And think about that with most people plan their week. I would say that it's possible that planning the week might be their least favorite moment in the week. It must be the moment with the most dread, the moment with the most avoidance. And mine is literally my favorite moment of the week. So what I've done is I've transformed the resistance that I had to planning my week into a craving by making the planning session itself a massive reward.
That makes so much sense. So you're basically creating a brand new environment from which you thrive within, that you enjoy, and you feel this sense of not only accomplishment because you've planned out the entire week, but an amazing connection with your wife.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the reward. It's not just the lattes. It's not just the croissant. It's not just the great meal, but also, I hope this doesn't sound weird, because it is weird, but I find the feeling that comes after a great planning session to be, wait for it, orgasmic. And I say that because there's so much tension. Like, think about it. Not having a plan for the week, whether you acknowledge it or not, creates a massive amount of tension inside of you. I don't know what's coming. I don't know if I've scanned my calendar correctly. It's just tension, 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 and it builds and builds and builds. And when you or you and your spouse sit down and make a plan, think about what happens to that tension. Oh, there's just this rush, this relief that happens. And then if you're in a cool situation together and you can have that moment together, it's just such a beautiful moment to share together of like, oh, okay, there's a plan. I know what it is. And then I'm predicting, tell me if I'm wrong, email me if I'm wrong, but I'm predicting that you experience the best version of yourself. You experience the best version of your spouse in that relief and that release moment. Does that make sense? So
That makes,
it's
yeah.
not just the environment. It's not just the baguettes. It's not just the meal. It's also the sharing of that relief that comes when you actually have a plan in place. Because I know it. I get it. There's so much avoidance. There's so much avoidance. There's so much avoidance until all that avoidance crescendos in relief at
Yeah.
the end of the planning session.
I totally, I'm totally picking up what you're putting down, and I'll share with you why. So my wife and I talk about how when we sit down and we plan our week, it actually elevates intimacy with us because,
Yes.
but here's the funny thing. I've never heard anybody talk about productivity and planning the week with resistance, but you're the first one, and it makes so much sense. And I will tell you that my wife and I usually sit down at just our kitchen table on a Sunday, and neither one of us are like overjoyed to do it. Right. But we know we have to, and we feel great after we're done. I've never once thought about changing the environment and making it maybe more of a date, maybe making it more of a connection. But here's what I'll tell you. Finances is 50% of divorces are caused because of financial distress, right?
Yeah.
But there's also this thing that my wife and I definitely agree upon, and that is financial intimacy. So we're able to talk about our finances pretty openly, right? Without necessarily being triggered. And we both know each other's strengths when it comes to our finances. So one of the cool things about when we discuss our finances is that it actually elevates what we call our financial intimacy. And we actually feel pretty good when we're like, okay, this is what we're going to do. These are the things that are going on, and this is where we're going to put our funds and that kind of thing. But here's the other cool thing too. My wife despises dinners, and she despises dinners for a good reason. So we have 4 boys, and they're like, not so much the older 2, but the younger 2 are like the pickiest eaters on the planet. And my wife is always like, oh my God, like I do not want to make dinner, like, cause I know whatever I make, these 2 little ones, they're going to complain about it. And plus I just don't want to do it. Like my wife views making dinners as like a heavy thing.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we do when we plan our weeks is like, we basically, we make dinners Monday through Thursday. Friday, we like order pizza. Saturday, we'll do something. Sunday, I'll grill, but it's mostly Monday through Thursday. And I'm like, hey, I'll take Tuesday, Thursday. If you want to take Wednesday, Monday, and Wednesday. And for her, she's like, oh my God. Yeah. Thank you so much. And by the way, when we know what we're going to make and we tell the boys proactively, hey, Tuesday and Thursday, we're having this. Monday and Wednesday, we're having this. That way it doesn't come as a surprise to anybody. It's already planned. We know exactly what because one of the worst things that happens to us when it comes to dinners is when I come home or if it's my wife's night to cook and she looks at me and she's like, I haven't even thought about, it's 5:30. I haven't even thought about dinner. What do you think we should have? And I'm like, it's just heavy for both of us. So like, I definitely understand that, to where like you can really free up like some mental bandwidth. You can also connect, right? Because I know like one of the things my wife really appreciates are acts of service. So when I tell her like, hey, I got these 2 nights of dinner, she's like, oh my God, like I feel so loved by you. Right. And that actually improves intimacy. So I love the fact that you bring that up. That is really cool.
You know, I think that planning it's so fundamental. Everybody knows it. Less than 1% of us are doing it. It causes so many problems when we don't do it. And so I think people sometimes as a productivity coach want me to come and say, there's some really arcane thing you've never heard of. We become addicted to the thing we haven't heard of. Tell me something I've never heard of. Well, I'm here to tell you there's something you absolutely know you should be doing it. Statistically speaking, I can predict that any given person here is not doing it, right? And in fact, I would argue that people aren't doing it right. So you mentioned, let's come full circle. You'd mentioned basically telling your time where it needs to go and calendarizing your full calendar. So if I had to pick out one thing that people aren't doing right in their productivity, it's that they're not planning. And if I had to pick out one thing about planning that people aren't doing right, it's that they're not actually making their plan a plan. And here's what I mean by that. The very simple steps of planning are do a review of your last week and learn one lesson so that you can start seeing into your blind spots and improving. It's so simple, that concept. Look at your, set a leveraged priority so that no matter what, no matter how bad this week goes, you did something that made the week easier, made next week easier, made next month a little bit easier. If you just do that, that's all you need to be doing. Look at your time availability, right? Your time supply, right? And that's what your calendar represents. It's not just a place for putting your dentist appointments. It's a model of your 168 hours and your supply of time. And then look at your bids on your time, the demand, right? So if you're running a business, it would just be supply and demand, right? It would just be inventory and bids on inventory, right? And so that a lot of that people nod their head. But the last thing is you gotta marry them together, right? You gotta calendarize your task list. So what people will do, I find a lot, is they'll do some or all of those steps and then stop short of the last one. Meaning they'll have reviewed their calendar, they'll have looked at their task list, but they didn't marry the two together. And so I would just ask you, if you're out there and you can agree with the statement in personal finance that you need to give every dollar a destination, right? Every dollar has a destination. You need to tell your money where it's going to go. Then why is time any less important?
Wow.
How would time be any less important? How does time work by separate rules than your personal finance? I would argue that if you really give it a think, you realize that these rules apply even more for your time than they do for your money.
You know, I've heard that before, like give every dollar a destination. I've also heard the term give every dollar a job. I've never heard it towards time, but that is so true. So just so I understand correctly with what you teach, do you believe in like a to-do list? Like, hey, here's all the things I need to get done and then fitting them into your calendar, and that's how you do it?
Yeah. So for example, we're going to keep it light here, but if anybody wants to get a free training on how to plan their week in 30 minutes or less, go to winningtheweek.com. I like to think of myself as the Johnny Appleseed of weekly planning. I would love to, I'm just sort of putting out the right way to plan your week. I want to create a generational change in the way that we plan our week. So winningtheweek.com will show you, there's an hour-long in-depth training there that you can go through. But, when it comes to to-do lists, I'm an advocate of a to-do list, but I think there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. I'm an advocate of keeping a calendar, but I think there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. So I'll just give you an example of the wrong way. A lot of people will have a to-do list and cram it full of someday tasks, right? And someday tasks are just tasks that feels very important to you, but they're not going to happen imminently, like in the next month. So the problem with cramming your to-do list with someday tasks is it creates psychological weight, and you get what I call to-do list avoidance. I don't know if I used to have these to-do lists that were, every day I'd open it up and there's 200 items. And I'll tell you what, psychologically, you start to build avoidance. You just don't want to open it. And I found myself finding reasons not to open that to-do list because of how gargantuan it was. Well, in truth, 90% of the things that I had in that to-do list didn't have to be done in the next month, but I was psychologically imposing them upon myself. This is why I think, Microsoft Planner, Asana, the next generation of online task managers is so great because they have this boomerang function where you can write something down and you can say, I don't need to think about this till next year. And you can write it down, put a date for next year and throw it into the future and it disappears. You don't even see it. It's like in this, gray area. And then next year on the date when you needed to consider it, like a week before your taxes come due or a month before your taxes come due, it pops back into your to-do list, right? That's great because it gives you just-in-time information where you can get the bulk of things out of your view because your view ends up becoming important. This is a theory, not a fact, but having worked with tens of thousands of people on their to-do list, I think you can pretty much handle about 10 or 15 tasks per day. That's what your mind can really handle. And I see that people who try to handle more than that get to-do list avoidance. They just get freaked out by their to-do list. So do I believe in to-do lists? Absolutely. Absolutely crucial. Is there a wrong way to do it? 100%. A way you could 100% blow yourself up.
I could see that. That is fascinating. Is that kind of stuff available now? Like the whole boomerang thing where like, hey, I don't need to do this now.
Absolutely.
Maybe. Okay.
Asana, this is a fundamental feature that's built into the next. So Asana would be one brand of this new generation of task and project managers. And if you think about it, what it really is just like connected to-do lists, meaning what I can do, let's say you and I are working together, Larry, I can have my to-do list, but it's connected to yours. So what I can do is I can brainstorm 5 tasks and say, you know what? These tasks 2 and 3, actually, I don't have to do those. Those are for Larry. And I can reassign them to you and they will just pop up on your side. Now, these are great for collaboration and teams, but they're even just good for you to use they work just as a personal to-do list, but they work especially well and they really blossom when you're collaborating with other people, contractors and employees. Even a lot of my clients will end up using it as a chore system in the house where they'll have all the family members sort of assigning and reassigning tasks and communicating about tasks inside of it. So that's what's so special about this newest generation of task and project management services.
That is really cool, man. This has been awesome. I want to make sure that obviously winningtheweek.com, we'll have that in the show notes for all the guys, but I want to make sure like your other resources that you have, where can men find you as far as like working with you or any other resources that you have?
Yeah, I mean, a great way to start is let me show you I think the best of what we have to offer, which is how to plan your week. So that's at winningtheweek.com. If you want to learn more about us, you can go to the Life Hack Method. That's our website. But I would encourage people, go to winningtheweek.com because you get the free hour-long training. Also, we've got a book coming out on the same topic in July, and you can get on the early distribution list. The reason that there might be an incentive to do that is because we're actually going to give a bunch of free giveaways and, almost like online accompaniments to the book that people are going to get if they sign up early. So you can also get a chance to do that if you go there.
Oh, that is super cool, man. We've talked about a lot on this podcast. We've talked about like the perception of working our fingers to the bone, and the busy badge. I love that we covered that. I also love the fact that we gave men some ideas around planning their week, but how they can also do it connecting with their wives and elevating connection and intimacy just by changing the environment. And I think that that's incredible. This was super fun, man. I really, really enjoyed this. We're going to have all the links in the show notes. Anything else that you want to share before we head out?
No, man. I mean, I have a real passion for people realizing that we can solve the Rubik's Cube of life. You really can. And not even perfectly, but even an attempt to do so, putting your lifestyle first, is just so fundamental. And I've just seen client after client use productivity, not for its own sake, because I think productivity for productivity's sake is an abomination that leads to workaholism, but use productivity and getting organized as the number one tool to create the life that they really want to be living and be the person who they really want to be. So for people out there who think, oh man, I don't love productivity, I get it. I don't either. It just so happens to be such a great tool to build the kind of lifestyle that you want to build. So I'd encourage people who really aren't naturally attracted to planning the week, being productive, using some of these tools to change how they think about it. And see it maybe as a boring tool, but a really effective tool to create something really exciting, which is those 4 freedoms, right? Time freedom, money freedom, career freedom, spiritual freedom.
That's cool, man. I really love what you're doing, especially, as I think about like the past 7 years working with men, so many men would benefit from doing just those little things. It would clear up so much mental bandwidth. It would help them tremendously. So guys, if, again, we're talking to Demir Bentley, by the way, really cool name you got there, my friend.
Thank you.
Especially the last name. That's pretty cool. For all the show notes, guys, you can head on over to thedadedge.com/Friday 52. Again, thedadedge.com/Friday 52. We're going to have all the links for Damir in the show notes, as well as his book, winningtheweek.com, which, by the way, when he was talking, I actually went to winningtheweek.com. It's a cool video. Make sure you guys check that out. So Damir, thank you so much for coming on, man. This was so much fun.
I had a blast, man. Thanks so much.
Dude. All right, man. Gentlemen, go out, live legendary. Take care.